case study. And in the YouTube case study, he did the same thing. And it was like 3 questions in one. And it made it really hard for the person who's asking, that he was interviewing to answer the question because you don't know which one he's answering. And so I was like, do you do that in sales calls too? And he's like, yeah, I do. I go, pick one question at a time. Focus on one question
Yeah.
at a time, and it will make the conversation flow much better.
Yeah, totally. No, and it just pushes all of the effort. It pushes the focus of the question should be well thought through, ideally prior, especially on sales call. So
Yeah.
that's totally true. So yeah, we're live. I think where we left off yesterday was a slide you showed me on the high level framework that you'd like to use, which I'm sure is
Mm-hmm.
always evolving and improving.
Sure.
But we went through the 5-6 basic components of essentially every business, every SaaS. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, why don't we, and for those interested, you can go watch part 1, but why are we not continuing from that point? And then we can segue into either MagicBlog or whatever you want to go with. I have a deck as well that maybe we can go through quickly. But yeah, I'm flexible. Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, we can start, and for the visual learners like me, I will get my screen up, and that way we can talk about it and double click on a few areas because this is my Notion hub, which is my second brain. I keep everything inside of here. My COO recently pulled my CRM out of
Yeah.
here, so that's the only thing now that isn't inside of Notion. But
Where
yeah,
does
I
it
think
live? Where does it live now?
we built an Airtable one that it's like integrates every part of my funnel and from Zapier. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that's nice. So yeah, so exactly, this is the slide we left off on, and maybe a little bit of context, like we're discussing the go-to-market framework that I'd like to learn more from you on. But we're discussing it in the context of one of the ventures that I'm building now within Coalfire Ventures, which the working title is MagicBlog. We already touched briefly yesterday. It might be subject to a name change depending on the actual value proposition, which I'm completely open to. The days I'm married to one particular domain or brand kind of behind me, I hope. But I do like the name MagicBlog. I think it's very memorable. I have tested it with some folks. But obviously, if we're not ending up in the blog domain, then it doesn't make much sense. So that's a side note. Yeah, the high level pitch, and then I want to give the mic to you and sort of download your go-to-market brain on top of that venture is I run an agency, still run an agency called coldfire.email. It's focused on outbound. Our tagline is polite cold email, which really just means we focus on more sophisticated buyers, like up in the potential client hierarchy. So VP level and up, which obviously require a nuanced and direct way of copywriting. And while I was running a campaign for one of our clients, we jumped on a call after that and essentially realized that content is really where their challenge lies. So quite one or two sort of columns over in terms of channels from direct outbound. And once we started to unpack that a little bit, I realized that what they told me, they had 2 options pretty much in the market when it came to content creation for their business, which happened to be a SaaS as well. One was, broadly speaking, go with an outsourced agency, which often leverage the arbitrage of low-cost labor, overseas, some sort of a VA in the Philippines or what have you. And then alternatively, option B, very popular these days now in 2023 and counting, is AI, right? And there's just a flood of tools in that domain. But the realization was that both suffered from some quality issues, predominantly because if you use content to actually capture someone's attention, to reveal your expertise and authority in a certain domain, which is the core reason most people want to use content in the first place as some sort of a lead magnet or a lead generator, or help boost their awareness and increase their thought leadership and authority in the particular domain they're active in. If the content is quite shallow and sort of either has issues grammar-wise, or the English isn't really there, or the topic isn't really that relevant or interesting, it's extremely hard to convert anyone from that lead magnet to an MQL, let alone an SQL down the funnel. So that's all to say that genuine user-generated content is in high demand. This is what I've noticed, talking to multiple companies by now. And the reason you could do that is by basically interviewing the target market, which is an increasingly familiar playbook to people, either on podcasts or in writing. And that's something I've been thinking quite a lot about. And so the concept of MagicBlog is essentially, I help you, Mike, with your business. You sell a B2B SaaS tool into, let's say, the food and beverage market. I give you a tool, which is MagicBlog, that then allows you to interview in writing, conduct written interviews with thought leaders in the food and beverage industry who generate content. They get exposure. So you help them produce content, or sorry, I help you produce content, which attracts that demographic to your tool, but more importantly, creates more lead generation on the back of that as well. So we can get into the details, but that's very high level, a summary of where I'm at with the thinking. I built an MVP within 4 or 5 weeks. I did about 130 interviews, which are published on coldfire.email/blog. And yeah, it's a productized service for now. And I just love to get into the details and what a first 3-4 months go to market might look like. So, but
Sure.
yeah, happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think that's a good overview. You sent me the deck yesterday, which I always struggle with communicating uh, what the real problem you're solving and the value proposition in these decks, and especially when they're for a certain audience, you're trying to portray something to them, and ultimately maybe there's a mix of communication. So your verbal explanation now helped me see the gap in the market, and you can see that's number one, right? I always start with my go-to-market is what is the need, which you clearly outlined there for marketing
Mhm.
teams at companies. It's content creation, quality content creation, and the gap in the market is your options today are either to outsource or you're hiring someone full time, but then they're pulled in a bunch of different directions, and how can you expect them to do content, and then they have to do product marketing, and then they have to do SEO. I mean, you want this all-star marketer to do 10 things. So there's a friction, and what it sounds like you're filling with MagicBlog is the gap between outsourcing, having someone do it internally, and instead AI is going to mix up some user interviews and turn it into thought leadership content. Is that right, Jord?
Yeah, I would say if I really boil down the core value prop is we help you, on the one hand, save time, but that's perhaps the second value prop. The primary one would be we help you increase exposure and top funnel through content production, which otherwise would have taken you, significant resources, as you said. If you do it in-house, to be honest, it's often more an intern or a junior person that
Yeah,
gets a lot of stuff thrown over the wall.
right,
And you mentioned something interesting, which is, a 10x marketeer is supposed to do all these things. But the thing is, most people don't have a 10x marketeer. Actually, very,
right,
very few companies have a 10x marketeer.
right,
So if you're just a junior and they say, hey, can you start producing some content? Like they're just kind of floating in the middle of the ocean. There's no anchor, there's no structure, right? It's like, oh, let me start reading up on how to do that. You're in marketing, right? There's so many things you can do. You can go very deep in a vertical, you can go very wide with a lot of channels. If you choose 1 or 2 or 3 channels, how do you then produce a calendar? And most importantly, how do you stay consistent, essentially, right? And especially in the content
mm-hmm.
game, you got to have a mid-long-term strategy to really
Yep,
maintain that and upkeep that production, which is extremely time-consuming
yep,
and to be honest, unrealistic to expect from a junior person. It's just not
yep,
going to happen. They are pulled in many different ways, and the reason a junior person is less likely to do so is because, well, they're junior and not so much intellectually they're unable to do it. They can, but they're pulled in many different ways, and they don't have the authority yet within their respective organization to say no and push back. That's my
right,
experience. And so
Yep.
it's like, hey, Jane, can you help me do this? And then, you know, the COO comes in, hey, Jane, can you do that? And before you know it, she's helping you,
Yeah.
prepare Christmas packages for all the
Right.
employees and supporting HR
Right.
basically, So I think people are quite
Right.
familiar with that. What I want to do is say, hey, Jane, or hey, boss of Jane in this example, you need content, agreed. That's time consuming, agreed. You can either do AI, which is shallow, questionable. Everyone uses that.
Yeah.
So it kind of regresses back to the mean. Google is penalizing, sort of already issuing penalties, if you will, for mass uploads in production. Like it just says, hey,
Yep.
this is kind of black hat practices. We don't like that. Or
Yeah.
alternatively, again, I go outsource it and now I need someone to actually manage that. And again, a junior person who doesn't really know how to do it themselves is very unlikely to then be an effective manager of someone overseas with a 10-hour time difference, right? In the
Yep.
Philippines or whatever, Southeast Asia somewhere. So those are your two main avenues. I think there's a vacuum in the middle where I say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you get full control. What we do is we do a one setup call. We discuss your ICP, your go-to market. We're going to,
Mm-hmm.
with our system in the back end, start reaching out to these folks and get them to do an interview with you. You as the client can discuss and choose the interview questions, let's say 6, 7, 8 interview questions.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're happy with those questions, the motion that we run in the backend, which is completely invisible to you, the client, is essentially make sure people go through that whole motion, get the interview done, and at the end of the day, we have an interview text, the raw original text. We can run that through GPT, of course, and summarize it and do some funky things with it. But at the end of the day, I would like to push that back into your CRM or wherever you would like it to live, and you can just copy paste it into your own CMS as a blog post. We can chop it up and you can repurpose it across your social media channels. So
Mm-hmm.
we just do all of the hard work and we're like presenting it to you on a silver platter. And now you can just push it into all of your channels. And so that's the content production value. That's a long way of saying
Yep.
that. The second part is
Yeah.
it's lead gen. The reason you have been able to interview these people is because there's something in it for them. You don't just go knock on their door and say, hey, I'm Jane, I'm selling product X. Are you interested? 99.9% is going to say, no, please leave me alone. Cold email is experiencing serious fatigue across the industry. I know that because I run an email agency and I see the statistics. And so, but if you come in and say, hey, Mike, would you like to get interviewed for X, Y, and Z? We really love your profile. Here's a growth series that we're doing online, right?
Yep.
And would you
Yep.
like to be a part of that? We see significant participation. And now that you have offered them something and it's live and there's some value that you've exchanged or offered already, there's a genuine feeling of reciprocity, right? People want to give back. And so it's just it's a slightly longer funnel in motion, in fairness, but I think the
Yep.
value is in us condensing that to a single turnkey solution and then helping people both produce content and generate lead gen simultaneously. Now, and I'll wrap with
Mm.
this. The question for me is primarily, are those things both equally valuable and to whom? Probably not the same person. Maybe marketing gravitates more to content. Maybe a sales team is more interested in lead gen. I think it's very difficult to focus on two things at the same time if you're a startup. So how would you think through? That might be one sort of first question that comes to my mind to ask you. How would you think about exploring whether you go left or right with those two value props, or would you mix it or A/B test it? What are your thoughts around that
Yeah.
question?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You just laid a lot out there, and I've got a good value prop, which is number two. But to answer your question directly, how would I attack it? Is you have to definitely A/B test with your ideal customer. And what I heard you saying there was kind of two ideal customers, right? So there's like a VP of marketing, director of marketing, who's making decisions ultimately on how do I resource, how do I budget for this year, and make sure that I'm able to hit my KPIs. And if that VP of marketing has a demand generation responsibility, which is leads, underneath them, then you have to position it as here's the return on investment. And I'm a product marketer by trade, so I understand positioning, messaging, how you have to bring these in front of them. Because you made a comment which I love, is like we help them save time, but that's not the most important part of this. It's we can help you generate leads and have return on investment. Because there's three core areas when I think of value prop. There's save time, generate money, or save money, and efficiency. And this is kind of touching all three, but which one's going to move the needle the most? That's going to help them sell this to their CFO when it's time for budgets at the end of the year, which is where we're at right now. So, you can A/B test the messaging based on the organization, but ultimately, I think you're going to have to say, this is going to be an evergreen lead gen tool that is going to be posted across your socials, and any customer looking for your product throughout time will be able to find it and be thinking of you top of mind when it's time to make a decision for your product. And so that's kind of how I think about it. But I did prepare some stuff for our text last night, so please think about go-to-market motion. Before we get too far into the value proposition and the funnel, which I think we're already going to, I'd love to kind of show you how I think about the process,
Mm-hmm.
step one of a MagicBlog, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. And I'm just going to make a note because I do have a question to circle back to on the things you just
Sure.
mentioned. But yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Cool. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse by already picking like a value proposition. But I went in and I did my market research. Thankfully, in 2023, what used to take 10 people, now one person can do with GPT. And so I put myself in the shoes of kind of your ideal customer. As a CMO at a Fortune 1000 company, what are the top 10 biggest challenges that you face when trying to create content and content for prospects and leads? And we hit on some of these key pain points that you talked about. Limited resource for content creation, difficulty in understanding target audience's needs, which is why you do the interviews, creating engaging and compelling content, keeping up with content trends and industry trends, balancing creativity and SEO, which we could definitely have your interviews have some great SEO link juice, measuring content performance and ROI. There's a great value add that you could have for your product. And this is how I think. This is just the first prompt. I go through market size. I go through who your competitors are, which this one didn't spit out a great result, so I'm not going to show you that one. And then even your customer needs, right? So like, what are their pains, dreams, wants, and fears? And so, from this one, the pains are difficulty in generating high quality content, right? You're either outsourcing it or you have someone junior who you have to spend 10 hours a week trying to coach to make a good video. And really what they want is they want to establish themselves as a thought leader. They want a content creation process that saves time, right, Jord? And they're missing out on customers because they're not producing content. And it goes all the way through. So this is my step one of my unique method is we go through and really parse out what are the pain points? What are the problems we're solving? And that's where we double down and we begin to create this ideal customer profile, a value proposition, pricing, and packaging. So I wanted to show you that. Feel free to ask the question that you wrote down because I didn't want to skip through that process. It's crucial for every business. Before you start building the entire funnel and how you're going to sell it and who you're selling to, you got to know what problem you're solving.
Absolutely, yeah. So the question I had, which it might skip ahead one or two questions in your framework, but I do, if I can skip forward without
Please.
without sabotaging the conversation, I think it's always worth it and try to get to the conclusion faster. So what I've seen in the agency world, which I'm wary of as a result of this experience, is that people that this is an overgeneralization, but I've seen it happen enough to know that there's a strong correlation. People looking for a lead gen. In other words, you can already fast forward this to MagicBlog, right? We discussed it. If people are gravitating towards the value proposition of the lead gen component as opposed to the content generation component, you got to ask yourself, what type of companies are you going to attract? And you're going to likely attract, like I have experienced in the agency world, you're going to attract companies that don't have their lead gen in order. And what that means is that if you're a business and you're excuse me, if you're unable to do lead gen in-house, which is arguably the most important thing in the company, because without that, you don't have product market fit and you don't have revenue, you don't have anything. You're going to attract, I don't want to say loser companies, but B, C, D players, right? And it is very highly correlated with companies that just don't have product market fit or are sort of trying to break through product market fit. And they try to have you help them with that, which downstream is just a nightmare to deal with because, well, for obvious reasons. So I just wanted to lay that out there and be a little bit critical of that idea where if we were to go down the path of the value prop being primarily focused towards sales teams, let's say, or VPs of marketing with KPIs and targets, and they gotta, deliver results in terms of hardcore lead gen, then they're gonna come back to me and say, hey, you promised me XYZ number of leads, and I'm on the hook for that. Now, that could work if everything works out. It just attracts perhaps less than ideal customers, and I would much rather work with customers that have very strong product market fit, who have an issue with content production, and I know for a fact I can generate that, but I'm just extrapolating this value prop downstream through my entire service delivery of the business, which could give me a lot of churn and sort of issues down the road.
Yeah, very good forethought of thinking a few steps ahead. And I'm curious how you think about, I'm going to turn a question around to you. How do you think about selecting customers when you're building a SaaS? Are you picky, or do you take on anybody because they'll pay you?
Yeah, obviously you got to be picky, not so much because you have the luxury to in the beginning, because you see dollar signs everywhere. Of course, you should try and start. Like I said, I've done an MVP for an in-house client, which is Coldfire. Like, it's a group company in my portfolio. Obviously, no money traded hands, but the value was very clear to me, right? We did 135 or so interviews within 4 weeks, and we got like 12 or I think 14, 15 leads as a result of those. So that's just one data point, but the funnel works, the technology works, and people across industries are very likely to participate. Obviously, their self-interest is is pretty strong, right? People love to get featured. But yeah, like I said, I mean, I would be very careful in going down the path of overpromising, or not overpromising, just promising any kind of lead gen, because I need my client to be a part of that formula. And again, like, maybe I haven't stated it clearly, just to put it in different words, in the cold outbound agency, there's two things that you need, right? One is very good cold outbound motion with scripts, technology, deliverability, and an audience list. So that's what I did. That's the value I bring as an agency. But then I also need someone who actually has a product that the market wants. And that's what my client brings. If my client doesn't bring a product or service that the market needs, no matter how efficient my cold outbound motion, there's never going to be a match. And I will get churned as an agency if I don't deliver leads, even though if my part is 80, 90% executed correctly, they don't have product market fit, I'm going to get the blame, which makes total sense from their point of view, but that's definitely something I want to avoid going into a SaaS environment. So that's sort of what I'm trying to say, is that everyone wants free content, everyone wants leads, but you're going to attract the wrong, perhaps, customer profile, because everyone wants leads. And if they are not able to do that in-house, it's usually some sort of signal for maybe not that good a company with that good a value prop to begin with. And no matter how effective the outbound motion of MagicBlog, we're not going to be successful, and therefore they're going to churn after 2-3 months.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think one
And churn is a killer of SaaS, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. One little tweak I would make is, I wouldn't say you don't want to go after those customers as clients. You don't want to use lead generation as the value proposition. It's a byproduct of the result of what you bring, but it's not a part of the core value proposition. And therefore, you're not promising something that they don't expect, or that they expect later, and they can come back and say, hey, this is what you told me as a part of the deliverable. It's like, no, we agreed that we would create content and user-generated, user interview content that would increase XYZ, and leads are a byproduct. Because you're not generating leads, maybe there's some internal systems that are broken, and you need to investigate that. And maybe they churn anyway. So I hear what you're saying.
Exactly.
I would challenge you though, Jord, in the beginning. Maybe those aren't the beta customers, but sometimes with startups, it takes bringing on a tool and flooding the infrastructure to find the broken things, and then they take action on it. And maybe they come to you on the flip side. You said you're an optimist. I'm an optimist too. They come to you in 3 months and they say, hey, Jord, we realize the value of this tool, and we also realize that our lead gen is broken. And oh, by the way, you run this outbound lead gen agency on the side. Can you help us? So there's always ways that you can position it where it could help the company maybe see something that they didn't see before.
Yeah, so to wrap up the previous point you mentioned, I completely agree. I think there's going to be, and perhaps this is worth taking a mental note, it's going to be important to strike the right balance between communicating through a simple message, whether that's a bullet point in the third or fourth section of the website, let's say, right? It's not going to be in your hero, but it's going to be somewhere on the web page. There's going to be a bullet point of value, a subset of value, a derivative value, if you will. Like you mentioned, that is not the primary value, but you do want to mention that there is a lead gen bonus, if you
Yep.
will, somewhere along the lines
Yeah.
of that,
Sure.
without it being clear enough that they are going to come back a week or two or a month later and say, hey, I read this thing on your site and you promised me. And it also won't be in the terms and conditions, right? It won't be in the contract because it's not the primary thing, but it should definitely be revealed in the sales process as a potential upside, because I agree that in general, lead gen and increasing revenue is the strongest value prop you can communicate. So there's a healthy tension there, and that's something to figure out in the messaging. But yeah, I just wanted to put a knot on that.
I like it. Yeah. Cool. So I think so far, we've understood number one, and we're getting closer to number two, pinning it down, at least for a hypothesis, because it's always a hypothesis. Ideal customer profile is going to be marketing teams, e.g., VP of marketing, VP of demand generation, somebody who's responsible for content. And we've pinned down mostly the value proposition. Now it gets to pricing and packaging. How do you put this together in front of a client?
Yeah, I'm just making some notes. Just a second. I want to circle back to
Sure.
these later because you said something. And then, oh yeah, sort of. Yeah, so this might actually be a good point to sort of mention them, and then you can tell me which one you want to unpack. I do want to touch on all three, but you tell me which one sounds more relevant at this moment in the conversation. So one is, I'll go very high level, and you tell me which one. So the first one would be niche. So that's sort of like, sure, we know it's marketing teams, agreed. Which niche, right? So many spaces and industries. That's a topic I want to dive into a little bit more, like how to
Sure.
discover that and how to go about that, and obviously reverse engineer the value of that niche down the road, right? Because you got to think about the value of the niche and the size of it. The second thing that I could discuss in more detail is where the lead's going to come from in terms of the interviewee. So if we're talking about this interview motion, as I mentioned earlier, if you are my client and you say, hey, I'm Mike, hey, I want to work with more SaaS companies, the easiest thing in this thing and the most wholesome sort of holistic approach would be for me as a vendor of MagicBlog to also do the audience building and go find these people and then put them in my motion, everything behind the scenes. So it truly looks like magic to you when you just get 8 or 10 or 12 interviews delivered in your lap every month, right? With your ideal customer profile.
Done for you.
That
To be
takes a
done for you.
lot of work on my end. So yeah,
Has to be done for you.
that's something I want to double click on. That's the second thing, because there is a second way to do it, and we can talk about that. So I call this one lead source. First one is niche, second one is lead source, and then the third thing I want to touch on is, and this is again zooming out a bit on the business model, whether to go vertical or horizontal, right? And what do I mean by that? We're now discussing a horizontal play where I create a tool and I go after niche A and maybe later B, C, D. But within this niche, I'm going to give all these types of customers my tool. And that's sort of a horizontal playbook. Everyone can start conducting interviews and receive them. And I'm sort of the white label guy in the background. Nobody knows me in terms of the final result. A vertical approach on the other side would be to say, hey, forget about becoming a SaaS in that sense. Why don't we keep all of this knowledge under the hood and we build a brand, and we actually don't care about signing up all these different customers. We're building our own kind of online premium magazine for niche A, and then later on we can do that for niche B. And we start interviewing all these folks, and we just create a vertical brand where all of the content is maintained and the quality is guaranteed within that vertical. And then you're doing a very different business model with either ads or subscriptions or what have you.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a mindset I wanted to expand a little bit on. So those are the three things I wanted to touch on.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, let's pivot. Let's pivot to that. I think you kind of understand where I'm at with these 6 steps and how I think about it, and I really would prefer to switch to those 3. I'm intrigued now. You got me hooked.
So again, repeat it, like niche selection. How do you think about that? Then lead source. You say it has to be done for you. I agree, but I also want to play devil's advocate, and I can push back on that. I have another thinking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
That's number 2, and the third one is vertical versus horizontal. Which one you want to go with first?
Let's close out the ICP part, ideal customer profile, which is niche. Because the 3 questions
Hmm.
I challenge
Okay.
my founders with are: what industry are you in, which
Hmm.
I would say is niche for here. What
Hmm.
problem are you solving, and what is
Hmm.
your target title? Well, we figured
Hmm.
out the problem and the target title,
Hmm.
right? So the problem is content creation, and target title is going to be marketing teams. So which industry or niche, in your words, are we going to go after? Uh, that is always a fun question because it takes a lot of testing. You can have a hypothesis, you have no idea which market's going to actually need and have the biggest, I guess, checkbook for this. So, but I'd love to hear your perspective too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the only framework that I can think of is to start at the end and reverse engineer it and say, okay, what if we
Mm,
put this niche in? Like, how does that look if we go back all the way? So, um, again, there's 3 layers in this value in this business. One is us, MagicBlog. 2 is my clients, our clients, and then 3 is the people that they want to reach in their market,
yeah,
which let's call them the interviewees.
yeah,
That's the target audience. So
yeah.
you got to align all those 3 and make sure everyone's incentivized across the stack. So it's not just enough for me to think, hey, what niche do I want to serve? It's like, okay, what niche do I want to serve? Whose end audience would be extremely well served by these interviews? Because that's
Hmm.
ultimately going to trickle back up, if that makes sense. So I would start with the end audience. What type of people, if interviewed in such a format, and it starts floating around the internet on Twitter, on LinkedIn, what have you, people start sharing it, would be the most viral. So I'm trying to incorporate as much product-led growth within that final result, and then reverse back to, okay, what type of client would benefit from those? And then we are at the end of the stack, like, or on top of it, depending on how you look at it. So
Nice.
that's an exercise I'd have to go through, and I agree we need to test it. But I would always start with, okay, I'm scrolling LinkedIn as an average user, no idea who I am. I'm just a professional. What type of interview is the most interesting to the average person? Which is an extremely difficult question to answer because average is it's extremely average in the sense that the spectrum of people is
Yeah,
so broad that you
yeah.
need to kind of come with this very generic sort of interesting profile. Now, if you go
Hmm.
niche by niche, and this touches on the vertical versus the horizontal play, you could say, hey, let's
Yeah,
first, for the first 6 months, we're only going to do interviews with, financial advisors or whatever. And that's interesting to a certain audience and capture that
yeah.
and then start going into the second niche. But if we go with
Mm,
the horizontal playbook, I think ultimately you're going to have to ask, we're going to have to ask ourselves, what type of what what type of audience loves to get interviewed?
yeah,
Because if we figure out that, then we can extrapolate one layer up and say, okay, that type of audience, let's call it plumbers, or let's call it people that have car showrooms. Okay, now I can go one level up, and those are going to be my clients, people that need to get in touch with people who own car dealerships. It's a little bit
yeah,
3
yeah.
chessboards that we're going to be moving on in this conversation.
I like to reverse engineer, and you hit on the last point. You said earlier, people love to be featured. I started that earlier. And so, yeah, you have to start with who are you going to reach out to cold and say, hey, we have a podcast or we have this interview opportunity for you. We'd love to connect. That's a great framework to pick a niche, and then you work backwards from there. I'm a huge fan of that. Let's assume that we're going horizontal for now, for sake of picking an industry, because if we go vertical, then we just pick one and have to try it, right? So going horizontal is more of an experiment.
Mhm.
Vertical is you pick one and commit, or maybe ABC test with one at a time and see which one's most viral and use data to make a
You
decision.
would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but
Totally.
I still think there's
And
a
you could even go
commitment.
horizontal first. Yeah, totally. You got to commit and run some proper time frame of outbound. Um, yeah, I mean, horizontal and vertical are not 100% mutually exclusive. I would think, just to kind of segue into that third topic for a second. I do think that in an ideal world, this becomes both. This becomes a SaaS tool, and we get to cherry pick the best, most viral, whatever KPI we attach to it. We get to pick we get to get the cream, whatever is the analogy. We get to get the first pick basically on the most
Yeah,
viral pieces of content, and then start publishing those on a completely separate brand on the back end.
yeah,
So different
yeah,
domain, different brand, completely on the front end, it doesn't look connected at all.
yeah,
And I think Forbes is kind of playing these kind of games, right? It's like, hey, Forbes 30 under 30. I think
yeah,
you might be on that list. I don't know. I don't want to insult you, but like, yeah, I have a lot of questions around who are on those lists, especially when I saw all those SBF and all those other guys. There are always these memes
yeah.
going around of
It's
Forbes
a pay
called
to
it,
play
right?
game.
A,
It's a
a
pay to
year,
play
a
game.
year, a year. It's a pay to play game, and a year before these guys end up in jail, they made the cover of Forbes. Elizabeth Holmes and SBF,
Sure.
and I
Yeah.
think the Bitcoin guy CZ is there as well. So that's just funny. But like, there's a world where you go horizontal, you sell it as a tool, you don't care about all that content other than the best content, whatever that ends up being. And this is what our clients could test out because they start running these experiments themselves. We see all that data and we now say, hey, this is sticky. This is what people read and are interested about. Let's say it's founders, right? Risk takers, adventurous, people that are overseas, international. And there's some sort of there's an adventure arc, there's a story arc. This is interesting to actually read, as opposed to all this mid-level, boring corporate America marketing BS that you see on like LinkedIn a lot.
Hmm.
This is real content, let's say. Let's wrap that in a brand and publish it there as well. And now I can upsell it. So it's like, hey, you have the tool. If you want us to like push that one onto our sort of magazine over here as well, that's going to be X amount extra, and you're going to get a
Yeah.
backlink from there. And we can do
Yeah.
this 10 times over and build 10 different domains and push it all over the internet in a well-designed website with a crisp CMS system and what have you.
Yeah.
But figuring out what that content is going to take some time. We may as well get paid while doing it. So I think you want to start horizontal and then potentially consider a vertical play down the road. Yeah,
I agree, and I see
but I don't know.
I see the personal brand. We'll call it, corporate brand, whatever. The way that you can build out a brand these days across different social media platforms, a lot of people do it with their own name, is so powerful that I'm thinking in my mind of, you said who likes to be interviewed, virality, like the interview with Jensen at NVIDIA, where he's saying, if I was 30 again, I wouldn't start a business. Like, that guy's interview with him has popped
Mhm.
off, right? And then if you're
Yeah.
getting the people who interview the Sam Altmans of the world, or you go interview the Oliver Brigado from Tabs, and all of a sudden these people who have unlocked
Mhm.
a piece of entrepreneurship or a piece of a business that has been behind closed doors for so many years, that Jack Welch just like turned into a book series, and how you manage, and it's like idolized. You can turn that into a vertical
Mhm.
SaaS very, very easily. And to your point, you get paid for it, it becomes a brand. And then it's a PLG motion, which you mentioned too, I love, where people are showing up like, hey, how do I get involved in this? How do I have my customers, my clients get interviewed and pop off, or maybe even my CEO?
Yeah, there's a thin line between authenticity and PR and exposure. And there's a bunch of companies out there, including Forbes, that it's pretty much pay to play. And the moment the word gets out that you are part of a pay to play model, you not necessarily lose business because people still, the desire to get featured and to have content out there is so strong that it's able to offset the inauthenticity that it comes with
Yeah,
and the critique it comes with. I think the most
definitely.
people know that Forbes is kind of BS these days, but it's still a powerful brand. So it's kind of still trumping that part.
Yeah.
Getting back to sort of our conversation around MagicBlog, we're talking about niche and ICP. Um, it's where we're at now. I think that's sort of where that's where That's where my clarity on the business model kind of ends, is because I haven't run enough tests yet. I know that I can get 14 to 20% ish conversion on a good, well distilled audience in getting them to participate in an interview if they believe it's genuine. It's very important to have them be grouped with peers so that when they go and preview the blog and preview who's been interviewed recently, it is people that they would like to get associated with, and it's relatively exclusive.
Yeah.
So you can't do this
Mm-hmm.
forever. This is not like you can get everyone's grandma like on the blog. Like it has to have some level of exclusivity. Otherwise it loses its value. And that means that the limited people you are going to get featured have to have significant value. So you're going to end up in the top of the organizational hierarchy pretty much. If you go too senior, it seems people don't want to engage because they're extremely aware of their time. So any C level or even SVP, even VP level is difficult. The sweet spot seems to be manager, senior manager, and director. They want to get featured. They want to impress their bosses, but they don't mind wasting an hour or so of their time on their boss's cost, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like in terms of niche, it comes down to end audience is interesting to share, and then those are going to be our clients, and then there's us. So I don't have a good answer for that at this moment.
Yeah, it comes with data. And I'm launching a tool right now with a founder that is targeting influencers, and that's as generic as it sounds. And it's really just a game of who is solving X problem using Y mechanism. In this case, who is creating video content that desires to build an email list, because this tool itself called Vidmula fills a gap where you can collect the email and text message phone number from your subscribers, which were previously held by the TikToks and Instagrams of the world. So now you can drive them and collect their contact information. And so, like, it's got this giant umbrella, which here would be who wants to have customer interviews with people that matter. And we have to find out what's X method and Y mechanism that drives for the customer. And I think my hypothesis is, Jord, it would be um, dependent on every single case for the first 20 customers until you figure out the formula of, okay, this SaaS tool likes to target facility managers that need a specific thing done on their sites. You're not going to be able to pinpoint a niche. And that's what I find with working with brand new SaaS tools every day is you have a hypothesis for your niche and you learn, and it's by going viral, which I think is something we've done before. This summer, my Dime a Dozen tool, we had 1.3 million views on Instagram. We had about 50 to 100,000 impressions on LinkedIn in back-to-back months. And those types of events informed our target market and product market fit more than any sort of test we did prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To wrap up on the niche, and we might circle back to it at a later point because I think it's a continuous conversation around who to go after. At the end of the day, if we go back to the value prop and we assume that it is content creation, you're gonna go after a niche that struggles particularly hard about content creation. And what type of niche would that be? I could sort of bottoms up reverse engineer that it is likely a niche that has a relatively boring service or product, because that makes it very hard to create interesting content. So if you sell super sexy, interesting chocolate online, like your man Oliver, what his name? Content is the name of the game, and it comes with the fact that you're novel and you're sexy. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, there's people selling commodities in the Midwest or large industrial machinery who might cost $50,000, $100,000, $500,000 per ticket, but extremely traditional. Have no idea what Zapier is, have no idea what UGC is. Like, they're not in the tech world. So my gut feel is that there might be something there. I'm in search of a blue ocean. I don't want to compete with all these tech savvy folks that say, oh, what you do, I can hack on the weekend on my own time using
Yeah,
GPT.
sure.
It's like, I know,
Yeah.
Like you're not my market. Like that's the value I bring, right? So we're gonna go somewhere where other people don't want to go. That's sort of
Yep.
my hunch. That will be my first directional instinct.
Yeah, I agree. There's the 1%, which is hacking on the weekends, which is where I hang out most days, and then there's the 99% where you show them, one interview with 10 clips and an hour after the show, and 10 clips that they can post to their Instagram, or they can send an outreach sequence for their sales team, and they'll go, "Holy shit, I need this," and that's who we need to target.
Right. Right. So just to give you like a quick anecdote, like this business journalism for industry leaders, it's a company called Industry Dive. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were one of the largest emailing exits, content/email exits in the last decade. I think they sold for 550 million. And what they've done is essentially gone after the long tail of niches. So kind of a The Hustle, like by Sam Parr, like he also did Trends, like kind of like in that space where these guys just got a lot of content somehow. I don't know exactly how they did it in the past 10 years of, plumbers or bridge builders or architects or something like extremely well defined and niche. And then they were able to advertise against that audience because it was so condensed. And I really like that idea, actually. And I think I can draw some inspiration from this exit. It is a proven exit. It's extremely valuable because they have just this massive database of very concentrated ICP. And yeah, perhaps our interview motion could be the start of a Industry Dive 2.0, something like that, where you not only have the value as the tool, but you also you also have the rights, and the terms and conditions will dictate. So you have the rights to all of the content collected through your tool, meaning you can sell it twice. You sell the tool once, you collect the data, and then, as we discussed earlier, you can do
Yep.
the vertical play on the back end
Yep.
somehow, at least later on. So I just wanted to show you that.
Yeah, this is great.
All right, so let's talk about. Sorry, yeah, if you wanna say something. Otherwise, I wanted to move to the lead source topic.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we can park the niche there. It's just a question mark of what are the next steps would be a question for me there. Like how to actually waste as little time as possible and go after a niche basically ASAP. So lead source, okay. So lead source is you said it's got to be done for you. So if I push back and take the other side of the argument, I would say, look,
Sure.
from a business operations perspective, being on the inside of MagicBlog, it is way harder to incorporate the audience list building and outreach than just facilitate the interview motion. Let's call it like that. If those are the two components of the business.
Yeah.
Now, therefore, much more interesting for the market. I agree. But if I protect the MVP and the startup and just making sure it is as simple as possible with as little complexity as possible, while at the same time, and we touched on this earlier, the most important thing, avoid getting sucked into a target market that needs our leads, meaning they see us as a lead gen, which, as we discussed earlier, has a high correlation with sort of B, C level companies that I don't want to work with anyway. I prefer to work with companies already have a lot of leads, but they just need content production, or they just need a filter mechanism to hash out within their CRM. Is this an MQL? Is this an SQL? What do I do with them? So when I worked with one of our clients, I saw their HubSpot account. I was in their funnel analyzing it. And I saw that, first of all, there was very poor CRM hygiene. So it just wasn't organized well. But second of all, a lot of deals got stuck between, I think it was the MQL, marketing qualified lead, and sales qualified lead stages. And everything was sort of like, it was just full there. I was like, what's going on here? And what they told me was, we don't really know what to do with these leads. And the reason was they were overqualified to send them back to marketing and rediscovery and pushing them back into some sort of low level newsletter awareness, right? Like a drip campaign. But they were underqualified to really push them down to an AE or some sort of SDR that had to spend time, valuable time, on the call. And so this company had enough leads, but there was a triaging / qualifying problem. And this is when I thought, this could also be very interesting for MagicBlog. What if we integrate with your CRM through an API, and you, as your sales team, get a 1-hour training, and you basically say, look, every time you've got a lead that is underqualified for A, but overqualified for B, and you don't really know where to move them, press this button. It pushes them to us, MagicBlog, in the backend. We start running our cycle, and once they complete the interview, now we push them back into your CRM, and now they're qualified, right? So it becomes like a qualifying tool. And what do we push back into their CRM? Obviously, the original interview with all the questions and answers. We can do a summarized version through GPT in bullet point format. And now it becomes more of a sales intelligence tool, which not necessarily is lead gen, but it's sort of lead qualifying, if that makes sense. And the big benefit of doing that value prop, as I said earlier, is you're not going to have to deal with people that don't have enough leads, because I don't want to deal with that, because now I'm on the hook for the lead gen. And if I'm unable to do so as a result of their poor value proposition or inability to have found product market fit to begin with, I'm just going to deal with shit all the time. I don't want that. So I prefer to deal with people that have more than enough leads, but they've got a qualifying problem. So that's sort of that's the devil's advocate argument for not doing it done for you, but saying like, hey, I'm not going to run all of this outbound motion on the back end. Fuck that. That's way too much work. I'm going to work with clients that have enough leads. I'm going to help them qualify through some sort of a CRM integration, exact messaging, TBD. But I'm going to be able to say, hey, you come with the leads, aka your CRM pushes some of them to me when you think the conditions are right. I'm going to run my motion in the background, and then I push it back to you. So now an AE can pick up the phone and say, hey, Kelly, amazing interview, like so interesting. Again, you build that rapport, and there's already that baseline of reciprocity because you've given some value. So I will pause there, but that's sort of the other side of the argument, I would say, then for done for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you kind of scope creeped it, but I'm okay with that because I like the way you're going. So done for you doesn't need to be end to end. Like we do the content, we do the lead gen, we hand AEs the silver platter and say reach out. That wasn't what I meant. I meant if we're going to sell them content creation, then we have to source the interviews. We have to get it ready and fit and finish where it's just turnkey. I think the custom API integration where you can help them go from MQL to SQL is a huge gap. And my biggest client, who I just churned last month, they had a big issue where marketing was producing thousands of MQLs a year, and one, the AEs wouldn't follow up on them, and two, the AEs said they were shit. And so they wouldn't really, even if they did get converted to an SQL, they rarely converted into a customer because they as you said, weren't nurtured, they weren't ready. There was that weird gap between like, hey, they're qualified, their lead scoring says they're ready to go, but they're not going to buy. And you need to nudge them over. So I really think that's a great upsell inside of the service.
If you had to pick one of the two, just gut feeling wise, and can dive into the details at another point in time. Very broad strokes. Would you go with, okay, the market needs on average more user-generated content production? That's value prop one. Or two, people need more of this sort of MQL, a proper MQL verification automation tool that just helps them what's the word, create a positive residue of sort of like shake out their CRM and basically just help them wheel through all of those MQLs that otherwise are just rotting away in their CRM, and try to juice some value out of that. Like, where do you see more value capture?
The value prop one is going to be way easier to convey because it's not new. And it's also something that they're problem aware of.
Yeah.
Value prop two, I would say most organizations either aren't prepared for that level of sophistication because, like, I haven't seen a really strong go-to-market lead motion where like the MCLs to the MQL to SQL has lead scoring process. I mean, people come to me every day trying to figure that out. So it's not very mature. And even if they did have the maturity where they knew there was this issue between MQL and SQL, you as a third party had to point it out to them. So they weren't even problem aware. And now you're trying to sell them a solution that they don't even know they need. So the sales cycle would be long. How big is your market is tough. So I would say value prop one, and then the second you upsell with value prop two once you're in there and you identify that problem.
Right.
You
Yeah, I
sell them the
agree.
solution
I
they
think
need, and
for
then
quick.
and then you help them with
Yeah,
strategy once you're in. Sorry to interrupt.
got it. No. I got it. Yeah, so I touched on all three. I thought those were both sort of the top of icebergs. Like there's a lot of stuff under the water still here that we can explore later on. But again, niche, the lead source, so done for you versus the whole thing I
Mm-hmm.
just mentioned, integrating with a
Yep.
CRM. I think it's a great upsell potential. And then vertical versus horizontal. I hope at least, correct me if I'm wrong, that added some color to the ideation and the concept and some nuance. And yeah, that's sort of where I am with the business. I really believe there's something here. It's about fencing off what to do now and what not to do, and then just let's get it live, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to niche right now. Like that will be my primary next step. What niche am I gonna go after? Um, yeah, it's very open-ended, so it's difficult to navigate this next step, I would think.
Yeah, I heard you say that before as an open point, and what I generally like to do, especially for my own content creation, is go find the most high intent, high volume keywords for what you're looking for, and see what type of demographics are sitting there. And let me give you an example of how this has worked. So, Deal, Deel, the head of growth who took that company
Yeah,
from
I know
1M
them.
to 300M. You familiar with Deal?
Yeah.
So she had a podcast with Lenny and the product guy. I'm sure he's huge, and she explained how they do their SEO system every week. And are you familiar? Did you listen to that podcast?
I listened to a summary of that podcast. I think she's the co-founder of Deal. She's a Chinese American lady, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Could be for
You're
sure.
talking about someone
Um,
else.
yeah, I'm not sure if she's Chinese American, but she was the head of growth. She was their first growth hire, and then now she manages everything for them from
Yeah, I
marketing,
saw
growth.
that podcast. With
Perfect.
yeah,
So the way that she did it, and
um, yeah.
and I think this is super clever, is they go take all the highest volume keywords and then they rank them high, medium, low of intent to buy. And then they make content for that. So for my YouTube channel, which I just started, I went ahead and did the same thing. I pulled 170 high volume keywords for what I'm trying to do, and I
Mhm.
ranked them. It was 2 weeks in, made a video with a high volume, high intent, and with 9 subscribers and like 6 videos, I had a SaaS founder find my video, reach out, book a call, and close them the same day because of that methodology. And the light bulb went off in my head. I was like, okay, so this is the game you need to play with the internet in 2023, moving into 24. And so if we're looking, as who is our niche, what I would do as a go do is go do some keyword research of who is looking for content creation for users or content creation for thought leadership, and go do this whole keyword research activity again, and then come back and look at it, go through high intent, and then make a little bit of content. You already have an MVP, put a couple blogs out there and set up a wait list. And then in the meantime, you have this amazing outbound engine. I do too, is set up an outbound engine that can reach out to people. And we pick 3 or 4 niches that we hypothesize on. Say, hey, I think this one would be good. We have a brainstorm session. I think this one would be good. I want to pick these two. Jord wants to pick these two. We have 4 campaigns. We A/B test and we go launch to the marketers, and we see what we can get between the inbound and outbound motion of who's going to sign up.
Yeah, this with the keywords thing, it is. I don't know how timeless that is. In other words, I'm trying to think through a 2, 3, 4 year plan. I know I shouldn't get ahead of myself too much. The thing with SaaS as opposed to an agency, the big difference is you got to commit. Every step you take, you're basically exponentially committing more. both in terms of resources, and it's just way more work upfront and way more cost associated with it upfront. So the sooner you can't pivot as easily as an agency, so you want to be right relatively quickly before you start committing like significant dollars. And in terms of keyword research and SEO, I don't know how much that is timeless. In other words, 2023, 2024, Google algorithms, like so many people are starting to play this keyword research game. It's almost, I don't know if there's like keyword fatigue yet, but I could see that happening at some point where it's just like email, right? Every channel gets saturated and it becomes extremely hard to stand out from the noise. I want to pause for a second and zoom out a little bit and just kind of get your sort of instinct, ex-founder, human interpretation slash feedback on the idea in general.
Mm,
Um, where's your brain at in terms of this could work or not? And I would really appreciate, some critique and honesty. And where do you see risks and how excited are you about this? Because you see other SaaS ideas, and I know your business is to work with founders and all that. So it's not going to be 100% objective. It's going to be subjective, but that's fine. But where's your mind on this idea? I hope you can see I've given it quite some thought and I've written it out to some extent. And obviously not everything is clear, but yeah,
yeah.
what do you think of the idea, the concept, and where it can go?
I think the content, the concept of content as a service is only going to get bigger as we move into the next few years. So, at first, I didn't understand it, and partially because of the name. And then, user generated content to me means something different than user interview content. And I think it will to many people who are hanging out in socials. But now that I fully understand it, content as a service, for B2B is a very big gap in the market. I don't know. I haven't heard of anyone really doing this. Usually, if you do, you're an in-house person that serves one purpose: either do it for your personal brand or to do it for your one company. So I see a very big potential with content as a service.
And if you had to guess pricing, and then from there on out, we can extrapolate revenue and just the opportunity, just the market opportunity, right? Let's put our investor hats on. I've got an idea about a monthly fee. If I say if we start with 10 interviews per client per month, if that would be the plan, um, and you could find the right niche, what type of monthly price point would you be willing to consider to test out with? That is not unrealistic for 10 interviews
Yeah.
per month.
So I know personally, I pay for a YouTube team, a video editing team as a monthly service, and I have a scriptwriter as a monthly service. And that's me personally as Mike Blumenthal. I know a bunch of other creators that do that. Convincing a B2B business to do it will be a different challenge, but I know individuals pay between 1,500 to 3,000 a month minimum for content as a service, video content as a service, we'll call. Could you charge a premium to do 10 interviews a month? Uh, Perhaps, but I imagine it would probably have to sit somewhere in that range, just because that's what the market charges for, freelancers trying to do it or small agencies trying to do it.
So 2K a month would be a not unreasonable price point to start testing out with.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, on the air, right?
So then just follow this calculation, right? Sort of back of the envelope math.
Yeah,
Presuming it's all highly automated, which that's the whole premise of a SaaS and the leverage and the arbitrage. Um, you know, if we work together and we get to first 10 clients, but then we figure out how to do it properly, and then we get it to 20 clients, right? Nothing crazy, but still pretty successful. Like 20
yeah,
clients paying 2K a
yeah,
month, they don't churn, they're happy, or churn is low and they're happy.
yeah,
You're now
yeah.
doing 40 to 50K a month, right? You're
Mm-hmm,
doing
mm-hmm.
over $500,000 a year, 600 grand a year. You're growing. you can easily put a 5x multiple on that revenue in terms of
Yep.
equity value when you're trying to exit. So now you're doing 5 times 500K. You've got a business of easily 2.5, maybe even $3 million. Um, how crazy is that? How realistic is that? How it just sounds so. It sounds like an amazing opportunity from a leverage point of view and a multiple point of view compared to the agency world. Or am I off by a zero somewhere, and is my calculations not correct?
You're I love back of the envelope. I think that's we call it back of the napkin, but recently everybody says back of the envelope, which I think is better. Um, yes, I think the only
Oh, we say
part where you
envelope in Europe. I guess it's
yep
napkin.
yep yeah, yeah
Sorry.
here because you're at a bar and there's a napkin, but yeah. So the
Right,
only
right,
part
right,
where
right.
you're a little ahead of your skis is the multiple. So a 5x multiple on something with 20 clients. I mean, yeah, you could probably get that, but if you go on acquire.com, they're going to kind of cap you around 3x. And I just went through this process in the last few months.
Yeah,
But at 20 customers, you're probably
yeah,
not going to be like, hey, Mike, let's get out of this right now. It's like, let's see how far we can take this. And I know in your deck, you wanted to go to I think it was a 9-figure exit, at least no, it was low 8 figures, but either way, it's viable.
no, obviously, if you're growing and you figure out how to do it with 20 clients, you should be able to figure out how to do it with 200 clients. I think that would be the fun part.
Yeah,
But yeah, just conservative side and like getting a win in at some point or taking some money off the table
right,
is
right.
is always worth considering
Yeah,
in the volatile industry of tech.
of
Um,
course.
we're about an hour and no, we're an hour and 15 minutes in. What do you want to do? Do you want to cover one more item or topic and wrap in the next five or so? What are you thinking?
You had a couple more questions we didn't get to on the. So, how excited am I about the idea, and like maybe 1 to 10, or I think those were the latter half questions, and then we can wrap if you're good with that.
Hmm. Well, yeah, you just kind of answered it, but well, you started to answer it, and you said, yeah, you think content on the macro level is going to grow. Um, you want to add anything to that? My question was indeed, what is your level of excitement around this and why?
Yeah. So I get excited when I work with people who have a vision that's more than just next month, next year, quick cash grab, and then also have an experience of executing it. So I get more excited about the people I work with than the products I work with. But to your point earlier, a product the market wants is always the golden goose. So time will tell. I think if you deliver this the right way and with the right level of white glove service and customer support, it'll be a hit. But there's 30, 50 tools that will take a YouTube clip or a podcast and turn it into 10 viral bits for short form content. So you're also competing against those tools and have to figure out how you can objection handle and say this is not just another AI tool. This is a white glove service, right? Almost a blend of SaaS and agency.
What I want to do, yeah. So to talk to to escape from that crowded space and to go towards the blue oceans, so to speak, while also forcing ourselves to think through the niche, which is the other core issue that I think we discussed, which is still a significant question mark. To cover and merge those two, what I want to do is, and you tell me how exactly to do this or on what time scale, but I'd like to get a half pager together, like just a messy Google Doc, what have you, a shared space where we force ourselves to think through a niche. Again, reverse engineer from the end, interview. Imagine the LinkedIn feed wall, and then what type of interview with what type of person should live there, which gets the most clicks and engagements because it is interesting by nature, and leverage that sexiness all the way up the value chain back to us. So we go through who then would be interested in interviewing them. So that would be our clients, and then we are back to us. Um, that exercise seems to be the most critical now. Of course, we can A/B test everything, but it still takes a lot of time and effort to set up all these campaigns. I know from cold email experience. And I prefer to not have to shoot in 20 directions and pray. I prefer to shoot in 2 or 3 directions, which were very well thought through, were calculated, leverage the 130 or so interviews I've already done with the MVP. Maybe you can have a look at that,
Yep,
coldfire.email/blog,
I
and
checked it out.
see which ones are popping up there. So to me, that's sort of the next logical step, but I'm happy to get some pushback from you on that now and potentially hear an alternative.
I agree. You need to have a half pager to concisely convey your message. I see that as a very critical next step. And to pick a niche, I would challenge you, and I was going to earlier. I don't think it's as important as you're putting emphasis on it, because the market will tell you who needs content as a service. And if you pick three, you might pigeonhole yourself. I hear you don't want to spray in 20 directions. I think you do have to pick three to start, and they're going to lead you where you're supposed to go. And it's not going to be that big a deal to change direction with very little, um, you know, infrastructure built out. This is the time to experiment. In 6 months, 20 customers, then you don't want to pivot. That's when it gets hard. But that would be my perspective on that point. Is yeah, I agree. Half page, I'm in whole agreement. Half pager, pick 3 or 4 niches and try it out. Maybe 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a half pager exercise that really says, okay, this niche, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Let's actually stick with 3, and then why,
Yeah.
right? And while answering the why question, you're going to have to be able to go through those 2, 3 layers of the value stack and say, hey, this interview will probably be much more likely to pop off on a social media platform and thereby having a lot of virality. Because here's the thing, the moment people actually end up reading these things, which is usually their direct first or second degree connections, which is what I've seen, you get a ton of engagements on them. Some get as much as 50 or 60 likes and like comments on them. The moment people start clicking this interview, what you want to have, obviously, is a badge there that says, hey, this interview was created by whatever the name, MagicBlog or some other new name, right? And so you get that product-led growth virality on that side as well. Yeah, so it's all about the niche then. Do you see any other critical direct next steps required, or would you say this is the sole focus in your framework as well?
No, I think getting clarity and picking the value, now we're in number 2, what's our marketing strategy? So we can't begin creating a funnel till we have that completed. The one thing from the MVP you have /blog is there's no video content. And I'm sure you're recording like we're doing now. There should be some sort of trailer, YouTube Shorts type bit where people can open, almost I'm thinking like a news article where like you go in and they have like a 30-second, but then you can also read. Because in 2023, people like to see and not many people like to read. So the fact that you had all those articles and I didn't see any video content in there kind of was like, oh, well, these are just kind of like repurposed, transcripts, but I'm not going to sit there and read those. But if I could jump in and in 45 seconds see what it's going to be about or what I can learn from it, now I'm hooked.
Yeah, and that touches on 2 critical things. One is now you're talking about video production, and that is way less scalable and much more production heavy, which completely messes up the unit economics of a potential model. Now you're not talking 2K a month. Now you're talking maybe, if you want to do 10 video interviews done for you as a service, now you're an agency, you're not a SaaS. So that sort of really puts some sand in the gearbox, if you wanna think of it that way. And I'm not opposed to it. You're then much more going down a vertical play. I think you're gonna force yourself into, okay, we're putting so much effort into the production of this content. We might as well go after heavy hitters. Those get the clicks. Those are genuinely interested. No one cares about, Kelly in, PR at some, Fortune 500 company. We want to hear from the up and coming person. And then you're really just using the playbook of the guy with Starter Story, right? That really sounds more like that model where you put a paywall on top of everything, try to advertise or do sponsorships against your audience. So that's quite a significant pivot. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying there's a reason there's no
Yeah.
video. It's because it's super hard and therefore it's going to be very expensive. Now, if we can find out a niche that's willing to pay for all that, that niche has to be very valuable. That's the transaction. Like we can put all of that content in there. I'd love to do flying around the US doing in-person interviews and making it super high end. But now we're not. Like which company would pay for that? Maybe we should go after banks. Maybe we should go after private equity firms and have a proper 4K camera set up, fly around the country. But now it's not 2K a month. Now it's 20K a month, right? It's a very different motion. So yeah, I got to put more thought into that. I don't know how I would automate that or arbitrage that because it is so much more work. Having said that, what's the other thing you said? You said video and then something else you mentioned. Escaped my mind now.
That was the big
Yeah,
point.
you're
And,
talking about
you know,
niche and then it, yeah.
I think Jord, video is a critical part of this. And even when I quoted you at 2K, or when we thumb in the air 2K, that included video production. And my video team, which I can send you my my YouTube channel after, they do unlimited videos every month for $800 a month. And it's incredible how
What kind
great
of video though?
the short form, long form, short form, long form, either one. And so if we took this
But you
recording,
are you interviewing? Yeah.
uh, it's primarily just me on camera with my iPhone 4K, and then I send them the raw, and then they turn it
Mm-hmm.
into really compelling video content.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
what I would challenge you is I don't think the video production as a service, like content as a service to me, it does not just include interview text. There has to be more. And for $2,000 a month, you don't have to promise 10 interviews a month. You could promise, yeah, we're going to do 10 interviews, and 3 of them we'll give you some viral clips out of. It would still, the cost wouldn't even be close. So I think that part can't be overlooked. I
The
hear you on sand in the gearbox for the
the
scalability
problem
of it. Go ahead. Yeah,
I just
go ahead.
I just see an issue with like you keep using the word viral and it's like it's I most companies are so boring and not sexy. There's a reason they're not ranking top of the charts on Shorts and TikTok and YouTube, right? Because they
Yeah,
sell commodities, they sell boring stuff. They're burning VC money with no end in sight, and they're gonna die a slow death. And the founders may know or may not know it, but that's just the reality. And so you don't want those as clients because they're going to churn, they're going to be trouble. No one wants what they're selling. That's the key thing. That's one of the main takeaways I would hope we have articulated on this call is to just make sure our value prop is also a filter for only dealing with very strong companies that have an issue that I know for a fact I can solve, which is through arbitrage and automation, which is content. Currently in the writing format, ideally with some video on it as well. But I'm
yeah,
not going to be on the hook for leads or KPIs, not because I don't know, not because I don't believe I can, but because it just attracts the wrong crowds because they are only after leads, which they haven't been able to generate themselves so far, which is a proxy
yeah,
for them being a loser company.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I like it. I
Um,
think this has been very
let's
productive.
yeah, thanks so much again for your time, and let's noodle on this offline. And uh, I think a next step, yeah, we can talk more offline. The next step would probably be get that niche down, and just we can do a lot of bottoms up thinking, first principles thinking about what those 1, 2, 3 niches would be, and why those companies might benefit from those interviews as well as their interviewees. And once we get that, then I think we can discuss next steps. Yeah.
Cool. That sounds good, man.
Thanks so much, and I hope people found some of this useful.
Cheers.